Well, it's not as nice as it was yesterday, unfortunately. A little bit of rain. It's no sae bonny, as we say here in Scotland. But I'm making the best of it. I've got the fire going relatively easily. Had that nice piece of oak to shelter the embers. So a couple of sparks, blow that to flame. Lovely. Some water on from the boil. What's good about this is you can actually set up a tarp to catch water, so the water shortage is not a problem when it's raining. So, you know, every cloud's got a silver lining. I've got some proper coffee on in the percolator, and the water I've got heating up there is for a wash later on, and washing pots and pans and things later on. So I've got a strike camp today, but I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to sit around, I'm going to wait for my coffee, I'm going to cook some breakfast, and maybe do some carving, and take my time, pack up, and head off in the high tide.
You're thinking, yeah, that you know what's coming now. Everywhere I look, everything is looking so good, and everyone is you. And I know I seem to rush straight in, and I just don't know where to begin. Everyone is you, everyone is. All I gotta do is just hold back and wait. And every time I try, I make the same mistake. And all I gotta do is just keep myself relaxed. And all I gotta do is keep my brain on track. And I know what you're thinking, yeah, that you know what's coming now. Everywhere I look, everything is looking so good, and everyone is you. And I know I seem to rush straight in, and I just don't know where to begin. Everyone is you, everyone is. And I hope that you find it. If freedom is all that you want, I can see a silver lining. I'll be here time after time, time after all. Everywhere I look, everything is looking so good, and everyone is you. And I know I seem to rush straight in, just don't know where to begin. Everyone is you, everyone is.
This is likely to be my only decent big cooked meal today, so I'm going to make it a big one. When do I not always make it a big one? All reared and made in Scotland. I like that. Keep it reasonably local. It's funny, the guys are big Lord of the Rings fans, you know. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan as well, but it's particularly Colin. And we've been making jokes about it, obviously, in references to the whole trip. I'm missing them today because the reference here is very strong. If they were here, I'd be like, what are you doing? Sausages? Tomatoes? Nice crispy bacon. Put it out, you fools! I'm sure they'll have a laugh when they see this back. What could be better when you're out camping in the morning, eh? Sausages, tomatoes, nice crispy bacon. I don't have any tomatoes, but tomato sauce will have to do. And my iced coffee that's been brewing away in the background. Oh, that's good. That percolator is supposed to be for 2 people, so I'll be rocketing after that double shot. So you've seen us had a really good time on this trip, and obviously we've been a lot of laughs and we've been joking around, been a bit silly and stuff, but I just wanted to bring you back to something serious for a second. You know, we take safety very, very seriously. You know, I'm an experienced canoeist and Skye has done his fair share of canoeing as well. I'm a qualified first aider. Both Colin and Skye have done a lot of camping. We know how to use bladed tools, we know how to do things safely. We can have a good time, but we're always considering what's the worst thing that can happen, and we're trying to mitigate those risks. I was just about to take out a couple of classes of my first aid kit. It's a good chance to give you a sort of really quick rundown on what I take, you know. This is my little first aid kit that comes with me pretty much everywhere. This will cover a really wide variety of different things, but it's not large enough to treat any real big injuries. For that, I've got my trauma kit. Now, this is my trauma kit. You see the difference in size? There maybe only is about 5 or 6 things in here, but they're big enough to stop major arterial bleeds and set major bone breakages like legs and things. Now you might ask, what is in my trauma kit? Well, SAM splint, which is for setting a variety of different injuries. You can hold a broken bone, a broken arm, broken leg in a relatively fixed position with the help of bandages, and this, because it's foam with a sort of flexible aluminium interior that you can then bend into different shapes to support different parts of the body. Very, very useful. So I've got these as well. I've got a couple of these. These are essentially what you would call Israeli bandages. They are a big bandage that's it's been vacuum packed, so it's really small, but it puffs out quite large, with a large amount of gauze and also a kind of tourniquet built into it. So you put the bandage on, the big gauze goes on over your injury, and you then wrap it around, and then it's got a sort of ratchet that you can sort of tighten. It's very, very simple, but it's strong. Tighten it right down, apply lots of pressure, and then lock that off with the remaining bandage, and that's really, really good. You can stop, I wouldn't say you can stop arterial bleeds with this, but the hemorrhagic granules and hemorrhagic gauze that I've got in the rest of my kit, you would put that on first and then put this over the top of it, and you can really stabilise someone who's in a really bad way. That can save lives. And obviously I've got plenty of these little stretch bandages. You need a lot of these for a big injury, so I just tend to have maybe 4 or 5 of these in each one of my packs. Now this is actually just another little handy pack of things that I use every day that I just want to have handy. I tend to keep one of these in each of my bags so that whichever bag I go into, I've got first aid supplies if I'm in a rush and I'm maybe panicked. So I've just got eye wash, I've got some throat medicine, I've got lots of plasters, I've got wound ointment, I've got burn gel, I've got some flexible plasters, a sticky bandage, and I've also got some antibacterial wipes and things like that. So this is the rest of my trauma kit. We've got a really good elastic fabric sticky bandage, and that's good for securing other bandages and other gauzes to wounds. And I've got a lot of these gloves, and these are not sterile, but they're pretty damn close. If you're in a situation where you're dealing with a lot of blood, you just want to keep the worst of the bacteria out. I do have proper sterilised gloves in my other pack, but this one again is just for quickness' sake, and I'll use them for other things around the camp as well, and obviously dispose them before, not put them back into my gauze kit. I've got these Celox Rapid Gauze. Now these are the most recent version of the anti-hemorrhagic coagulant treatments that Celox has came out with, and the gauze is really good because it's not a powder, it's actually impregnated gauze or bandage that you stuff into the wound, and that can cause an artificial clot very fast. These are lifesavers. You're very unlikely to need something this big, but since I deal with firearms as well as bladed tools like chainsaws and axes out with my camping, I thought I'd like to have things that are capable of dealing with large ballistic trauma. Now this is something you might not all be aware of. This is actually a chest seal, or a, what do they call it? Occlusive dressing for open chest wounds. So your sort of cavity that holds all your organs, that is actually fairly fragile. So you've basically all that sealed in there. But if you get the smallest little puncture in that, what happens is you essentially create a one-way valve. So your lungs collapse under the pressure of air and fluid and things are building up inside the chest cavity. I know it sounds really strange. Go and look that up if you don't know what I'm talking about. That's obviously a very simple explanation, but it really is surprising how quickly someone can die from a wound that doesn't even have any blood coming out of it. It could just be a puncture from someone doing maybe mountain biking, and they fall off and they hit a branch going at high speed. They break the branch off, and then as they're breathing, the sort of air and fluid and things are building up inside their chest cavity, putting pressure on the lungs, and they can actually suffocate very quickly. Now this is the solution for that. This is basically just a one-way valve going in the opposite direction. So it allows air and fluid out, it doesn't allow anything back in, which means you maintain the integrity of the cavity in there. So it's like basically a sterile seal, and that's, again, that is a lifesaver. You can kind of bodge this with, a bit of plastic and some bandage, or even just your hand over really solidly, but having the actual proper piece of kit to solve this is really valuable. And I've got obviously more of those Israeli bandages, and I've got a large tourniquet. Now this can deal with major arterial bleeds as well, so you can really put a lot of pressure on this and lock it off. And this is, you're also able to operate this one-handed, so that if you have an injury in your arm, you can actually wrap this on with the other, hopefully still functioning arm. So that's very useful. And I've also got coagulant, anti-hemorrhagic granules in the bottom of this as well. So I'll just put these back in. And I'll give you a rough rundown of what's in my other kit, my just day-to-day kit. Now thankfully I've never actually had to use any of these major ballistic treatments on myself, but I have had to use a couple on other people. So it's not only, by taking a really good first aid kit, you're not only looking after your own safety and giving yourself a little bit of insurance, you're also looking after the safety of those that you might come across, or those in your party. So in my little first aid kit, this is the one I use most often. The first things that are in this little bit, it's not really organised in terms of how many times I use it, it's just how it fits into the thing. So I've got some anti-san, that's good for treating bug bites. They can get infected really easily and really itchy, so that solves that. I've got my tick twisters. Again, I have them out almost daily in this sort of environment because there's a lot of ticks out here, and the guys have been using those as well. I've got emergency burn gel, good to have around fires. Putting a bandage on a burn is actually not a very good idea without applying something else that will stop the bandage adhering to the wound, because when you take the bandage off it tends to rip the skin away with it. So this is one of these things you can put on. It soothes the pain, but it also stops any bandages sticking to the wound. I've got some Savlon. I used that last night since I've got a couple of little chaps on my fingers from just picking bits of firewood, breaking bits of firewood off. I've got some throat medication. That's good if you get a sore throat when you're out. I've got some sterile saline, which is in a sterile pod. Now this has got multitudes of uses. You can use it as an eye wash, a wound wash, but you can also use it for compound fractures where the bone is sticking out of the skin. Now, to keep that bone alive, you need to keep it wet. So you can use this to wet the bone and wet the bandages directly around it. Wrap it, put the SAM splint on, wrap that up. That's a really good way of stabilising a bone, and it'll make it so much easier for the surgeons to then reset it afterwards, because the end of the bone is still alive and moist. So that's very, very useful. In this little flip out bit, I've just got a load of pills. I've got little sachets of wound cleansing wipes. I've got plasters, I've got pain relief, I've got antihistamines, and I've got sort of blister plasters. So those are all just things that you might need when you're out. You just need to quickly pick it out. Behind here, again, I've got some more bandages. This is one of these sort of triangular bandages. They're really good for stabilising like arm injuries and shoulder injuries, and you can use it for doing loads of different other treatments. And I've got some heat gel in here. That, again, that's more for keeping your hands and things warm when it's really cold, but it's very useful for helping people maybe recover from a slight chill, or maybe the first stages of hypothermia. Give them a couple of them, put them in their sleeping bag or emergency shelter, and it just gives them a bit of comfort. Inside this other little bit here, I've got, as I said, I've got my sterile gloves. Those are actually sterile because they're in a packet. I've got sort of eucalyptus sticks for relieving nasal congestion. Some lip balm. Earplugs, just in case we've got any delicate, light sleepers. More Steri-pods. These are the sterile saline, but just in smaller packets. Tweezers, great for pulling out splinters and other things where you need really, really small pincers for that. More bandages, more bandages. We've got some, the cotton swabs. Again, they're good for treating small injuries and applying different medicines and treatments to injuries. We've got some Compeed plasters. Those tend to be the best blister plasters that I've found on the market. They're really, really good. It's good for big hikes, like West Highland Way or something. I've got some more, as I said, I've got some more hemostatic granules in here, Celox. That's the original Celox, the powder. So that's for stopping major arterial bleeds as well. And again, in behind here, I've got just wound treatments. So I've got Steri strips, which are essentially stick-on stitches. I have wipes for treating insect bites, and just a modicum of different types of wipes, plasters, gauzes and things in there as well. So it's a fairly comprehensive little kit. I'm sure the emergency medics out there will say that I've got some things missing. I definitely do have some things missing. One of the things that I probably should have in here is an EpiPen, and that would be really useful if anybody has a really bad anaphylactic shock. I really should probably get one of them, but again, that's one of these things that you need to keep fresh and you need to buy regularly, as is the Celox. You can't let that go out of date. So I probably should. That's the biggest thing I think that's omitted from this. And if I was actually acting as an emergency medic for a trip, rather than just being myself running a trip with my friends, being the first aider, if I was running a professional trip, I would probably take a much bigger first aid kit. More like the first aid kit that I take when I'm working, when I'm doing tree work, because it's massive, it's huge, it's like this sort of size, it's in a sterile box, and it's got much of the same sort of stuff as in these two kits, but much more comprehensive. I have got Steri-pens in there, but a lot more wound dressings, and basically it's to deal with any injury I could possibly think of with regards to tree work, out with the really large things like neck stabilisation braces and things. But there you go, there's a rough rundown of my first aid kits. Take safety careful, guys, and if you can, go for a first aid training course. It really is a practical course over at least 3 days is so valuable. You're so glad you did it. You wouldn't believe the amount of different things that can happen to the human body just from normal day-to-day wear or from random occurrences. It's an amazing thing, your body. It can put up with so much trauma, but there's certain things that go wrong and you don't know what to do, that could be the end of you. So get some first aid training and get some really good first aid kits. It could save a life, and if it saves one life, it's all worth it. I was never one for these sort of bush hat or tilly hats, I always thought they looked a bit daft and people were just doing it for the look and they didn't really serve any practical purpose, Everybody had the same look, just tilly hats and swassy tops, and to be fair, I've come full circle on a lot of these things, like, wearing a swassy top right now, it is good. And these tilly hats actually are very, very useful. They've got lots of uses. I bought it to keep the sun off me on a particularly sunny canoe trip a couple of years ago, and ever since then I think I've got more and more used to it and sort of realised the potential of them. They keep the sun off, but they're also very effective at keeping the rain off. But one thing you've got to watch out if you're doing anything with the fire or doing anything where you need to keep whatever's in front of you dry. You need to watch out for tipping your head forwards and then the water cascading off of your hat onto whatever you're doing. I've did that a couple of times this trip because I've forgotten about it. But this is another one of the classic uses for it. If it's too wet to go down and put your knees down in the wet ground, or if you've got a sore back or whatever, if you don't have one of those telescopic bellows, this is a good way of fettling the fire when it gets a little bit low, especially on a day like this when it's really wet, you know. Pulls out of shape slightly, you got to pull it back same shape again, but I have to say, bush hats and tilly hats, I'm converted. Well done. Another thing I'd like to share with you as well is this Katana Boy 500. I bought it for making bowls and things out in the woods, and obviously, you know, being an arborist, I'm keen on anything that cuts wood, you know, chainsaws and bow saws, and obviously, you know, fixed blade saws like this. And this one is slightly ridiculous. They do make much bigger ones than this. I think going any bigger than this is absolute madness, but this one actually is very practical. There's no way I'd be able to cut anything like, you know, my chopping block that I cut there, or that big slice of oak there, with anything smaller than this, really. You know, you can't cut things that are the same diameter as the length of your saw. You have to cut it smaller so that you can use the draw. Now, if you look at something that most bushcrafters use, like Thaco Laplanders and the smaller silkies, you're really limited to very, very small wood with that. When you're on a longer trip like this, where you want to be making things, or you want to be fashioning things out of bigger lumps of wood, splitting down big lumps of wood, or you just want to be more efficient for the energy you put in, a big saw like this is actually really good. And I have to say, I've really been seeing the benefit of this in this trip, and the guys have as well. A lot of the time they've been doing the firewood runs, and then I've just been doing the cutting, because normally to cut the stuff they've been bringing in would just take forever, and they just probably wouldn't even be able to use those lumps of wood, you know. And it's also quite safe. I'm not too keen on how it closes, because the teeth are still very exposed, very close to your hands, but that's a small point. It locks open and it locks shut, which is very good. But what's also more handy than I thought is the case, because I thought, well, what's that going to do? That's just another bag within a bag that you don't need. But it's really good when you go for a firewood run. Sometimes you don't have firewood precisely where you are, maybe you've used it all up. So what's handy is you can take it, cut what you're going to cut, and then, you know, what do you want to do? You've got this saw that you have to carry along with all your wood. But this handy carrying strap here, you can just sling it over your back, and then you've got your hands free to carry the wood that you've just cut back. It's really been really handy, and it's not that much more weight or hassle or mass. That, you know, it's definitely worth it, you know. So yeah, again, Katana 500, I'm converted. Well done. So the weather has opened up a lovely little window for me, so I'm making a run for it. So that's me finished with my trip. It was absolutely amazing. That's the best trip I've had in a long time. The guys were great. We had loads of great meals, great times, great fun in the water, and this place is just absolutely stunning. I'm going to miss it. But I'm going to make a move while the going is good, and hopefully we'll plain sailing back to my vehicle. Thank you very much, campsite. Maybe I'll see you again sometime. But that's me on the way out. I just wanted to give you a slight little reminder to leave no trace when you go camping. I've got everything that I brought with me, out with me, and I cleaned up all my fire. I put water on the fire, made sure there was absolutely no embers, nothing left there. I tidied up the ash, the embers, and the fire scar, so that it basically looks like nobody was here. The vegetation around where we were walking is a little bit trampled. That'll recover in the next couple of months, and within 2 or 3 months, basically it'll look exactly the same as what it did before we got there. It's very, very important to leave these wild places as nice and as pristine as you find them, so that we can maintain these wild places for others and for the wildlife which makes its home there. And I tell you, I did not think that today was going to end like this. Absolutely stunning. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed making it. I had a great time. I'll be releasing a lot more videos like this in the future, so make sure and like this video, subscribe to Glens Bushcraft on YouTube, and click the little bell to be notified for future videos. Lots of videos on canoe expeditions, foraging, bushcraft and woodwork, and all things in between. Thanks for watching. I'm Mark from Glens. See you next time.